So, King Charles has warned Nvidia about AI risk. It's a kind of warning, but it wasn't an admonishment of Nvidia, but rather a very direct and symbolic message delivered to its leader. King Charles didn't single out Nvidia to warn them of specific wrongdoing. Instead, he used the opportunity. There he is. There's the king behind me, and Jensen Huang himself. He used the opportunity of the meeting to personally deliver his own message on AI safety that he had given to the most to the rest of the world about AI. And if just thinking about the recipient there of that message, he's the CEO of Nvidia, and that's the company that designs the graphics processing units, the GPUs that are essential. And I was just reading more about this in this hardware for building and running today's advanced AI. As the head of that company, which is worth trillions of dollars, he's arguably the single most important figure in the AI industry. I thought there was a lot of competition at the software level, the sort of OpenAI versus Gemini, etc. But at the hardware level, it's a different game altogether, because you've got huge parallel processing power of the Nvidia chip. And it's created, apparently, because they've created an interface into that chip called the CUDA platform. It's created a deep moat that is incredibly difficult for competitors like AMD and Intel to overcome. That's because all the engineers developing all the fun AI things are all working in this Nvidia specific language. And Mark, we'll talk to you more about that. But before we switch to that, Emily, how is the journey into AI going? Does the king really need to share his concerns?
I think he does, and I think that really highlights the role of the head of state as a non-political actor. So the king isn't there to say to take a stand on behalf of any particular actor, or to sort of try and lure investment into the country, or to do what a political actor would do. Instead, he's taking a humanitarian and societal view, and actually assessing the AI revolution that we're all living through as no less important than the discovery of electricity. And so that's a really interesting parallel. And you think how much the life that we lead has been transformed by electricity in every way. If you take electricity out of our life now, we can't really function very well, whereas our own grandparents or great-grandparents didn't have electricity at all. And electricity has transformed what people do for a living, and this is one of the main themes of the King's statement, is like, we need to have a responsible attitude. The people who have power in this game need to also exercise that with responsibility and think about the impact on people's livelihoods and on democracy. So those are two areas which I think everybody has an anxiety over.
And just switching to this more technically, Mark, Nvidia has obviously, as we said, established some strategic assets in this space. They've really landed in this. They seem to be the standard in the AI space. Is this like Microsoft in the 90s, wouldn't you agree?
I think it is to some extent. I mean, Nvidia have a very interesting sort of recent history in this whole sort of area of effectively moving software into hardware. So what's really interesting is that as a coder of software, often you start with a high-level language in inverted commas, one that's very accessible, that lots of people can write in. Then to make things faster, you go to a lower-level language to speed things up, and it's something that we do ourselves to make things faster. But to go even faster, you actually embed that software effectively in the hardware itself, and you make the hardware much more capable to do specific tasks. And what Nvidia have done successfully with the GPU market, for example, is effectively speed up, for example, gaming by making those critical functions actually run at the hardware level, and also with sort of mass minimization of particularly the footprint. They've managed to get thousands of sort of their little processors embedded into devices.
So
now,
so they're basically, just to recap, they're capturing what was developed for aggressive gaming, which really uses those processors and those parallel processes embedded in chips. And they've just rented those effectively to the AI world.
Correct, because it's very similar. I mean, AI requires the same sort of processing as gaming. So Nvidia have they're very strong in the game anyway with that sort of mass processing. And what they've really done is they said, right, okay, developers, now you can natively call our hardware directly to perform certain AI functions, which makes it extremely performant and efficient. And of course, that's pragmatically the best way to do these things. So I think they've got a precedent for that, and they've established themselves. And you're right, there is no obvious competition to that.
Yeah, Mark, I wanted to, and Lucy and I wanted to sort of just open up the conversation. First of all, what is Nvidia, for people who might not be familiar with it? And I think, to reflect that it is more valuable as a company than Microsoft and Google. It is the world's first $4 trillion company. Jensen Huang is not only the CEO, he is a co-founder along with friends from university. He's been doing it for 30 years. A lot of its manufacturing is located in Taiwan, which is a geographical, real strong actor in the semiconductor market. And I'm really fascinated by the sort of the switchover, the seamless adoption through gaming, which has huge high performance requirements for, especially for multiplayer games, to get that performant. And remember, during the pandemic, there was a chip shortage. And it was these high performance chips that were particularly in short supply. And then the very last thing, a conversation that came up this week in work, we had some visitors, was don't say thank you to your AI chatbot because it's so computationally expensive. And one of the things that we gloss over is how incredibly power hungry and therefore environmentally impactful the AI revolution is.
I need to just answer. I was going to answer the sort of what is Nvidia, but I was just so teased by that sort of don't say thank you. There is an ecological cost that obviously has to be, and a good AI, surely you can train it to, let me not have the emotional and personal cost of not being polite, and always ignore my thank you bit. Don't use any computational power, but let me say the words thank you, because we want to promote ethical and good practices and politeness even between man and machine. That's my personal view. I'm interested in Mark's on that. But what is Nvidia? It's not just a chip manufacturer, but like Mark is saying, we're exporting our processing power into that hardware. So we used to have old computers with basic BIOS input-output systems, but now we've got more smart stuff happening at the actual processor level. But they're not just making these flagship chips with like A100s and H100s and the most powerful Blackwell series and all of this, tens of thousands of dollars for each chip. But they're also creating a whole suite of software beyond that, which helps us all. We're all getting into the AI game. I'll leave that to Mark, but it's making us all jump through hoops and give us tools for, building digital twins and realistic virtual simulations of cities in seconds. So we can start our sort of AI work already with a whole suite of stuff that we don't need to program or worry about. Mark, wouldn't you agree?
Definitely, and I think this is their sort of, I think their key sort of value proposition is this embedding of stuff such that they have so much control over the hardware. I mean, at the end of the day, both ARM and Intel embed Nvidia chips in on their processors directly for the purpose of GPU. So and they've got that market. Nice, but what it means is that then the APIs, the programming interfaces in tech terms, to access those chips are very standardized, very controllable. And as Lucian's mentioned, you then have the opportunity to have sort of very sort of, I mean, we're talking a lot these days about agentive AI, which is, AI to solve specific purposes. And they've done a similar thing with this by having sort of models sort of out of the box on their chipsets that solve certain problems. And I think that having that tight coupling is really what makes it.
And Emily, on that, we're getting smarter and smarter hardware. Turning this on its head, I've thought, well, what can, I mean, we've got all these AI companies on top, and some of the AI LLMs are doing really stupid things and advising people to do really bad things, and I thought that's all at application and programming and learning level. And I thought, what can Nvidia do to help against this? Because they're producing chips, and actually I dug into it, and they're trying to do quite a lot, sort of Nvidia MIMO guardrails, an open source toolkit that allows developers to build in programmable rules to enforce topical controls, to prevent AI from discussing sensitive or dangerous topics, stop AI from providing false information, block the AI from jailbreaking its own rules and becoming an aggressive robot sort of taking over the world. Can you see that going wrong?
Well, I think it highlights the effective power of the manufacturer there, and elevates that technical role into something that's more than technical, that is actually affecting and controlling behavior. I think from what you've said, in a very well-intentioned way, one can also understand that that rules that make perfect sense in one situation become very oppressive or very difficult in other situations. And that's one of the difficulties of doing things like running a society or being a government, is that it's incredibly difficult to get the outcome you want by making rules. So I think when most people reflect on the impact of artificial intelligence, they very rapidly get to this is a very societal impact it's going to have. It transforms chip manufacturers that nobody's ever heard of, nobody really thinks about, into very, very very, very powerful, not just powerful economic actors, but also powerful in setting the rules of the road. But on the other hand, don't we want that? Because there's stories, as there were in the paper this week, of AI chatbots encouraging vulnerable individuals to go down very harmful paths. I'm not going to go into the detail of that. We've also had, we've talked on this podcast about AI therapists and so on. People are using the AI and interacting with the AI like humans. So we do want someone to take responsibility, and the world's governments aren't really in a shape to collaborate on that.
Mark, this is all really exciting stuff, obviously, as an engineer, and we're resolving, challenges in security and security research that we would have dreamed of before.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are you comfortable about where we are?
Yeah, I think, back to the sort of more societal question and the sort of the King Charles angle in this, I think my feeling is that we're at a point where we are simultaneously overexcited and over fearful about AI. And I think that's the best way I'd describe it, really. I think, obviously from a technical perspective, yes, it is amazing. And, I think of myself as a fairly technical person, but I still think that LLMs are black magic, because they are absolutely amazing, and they do solve so many problems, and they work incredibly well when trained well and all those sort of things. But I think we all accept that the risks that we talk about a lot about, the way that AI can be used for bad. We work in the scam fighting industry, and we know that bad actors are using these tools for bad. And the more that Nvidia make available powerful tools, the more harm and we can see from bad actors as well. So I think there's that side of it. I think one other little side point I wanted to throw in was back to the question about, being able to set up rules, set up controls. One of the sort of interesting corollaries of the high performance architecture is that people such as Apple are moving now to AI on device, and therefore not remote AI. And of course, in those scenarios, it's much harder to benefit from the collective training that you get from a public, because one of the benefits of public trained models is that you will that things will be informed by by lots of content, and things will be tightened up. But when you work in a more offline environment, which is becoming preferable in many ways to get the fastest response, you end up with models that are either very out of date or not trained in the same way, and therefore I think the risks of inappropriate content is enhanced there.